hope when there doesn't seem to be any. We'll show you how today on Deeper Living.
From coast to coast across North America, this is Deeper Living, bringing the inspirational marketplace to your front door. We exist to bring you the latest and greatest from authors, artists, and artisans around the world. You're going to love this.
Welcome to Deeper Living. I'm your host, Ginger Garrett, and we are joined today by Debby Jones. Welcome.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here, Ginger.
And you have written a book which really caught my eye when it crossed my doorstep, A Rose Among the Ashes. Now, I'm not used to thinking about roses in ashes, so what does the title of your book mean?
Well, I agree with you. I did not either until God gave me a love poem that I wrote to my husband in 1997, and it's based on he was a rose among ashes when I had another tragedy in my life. And then God began to show me, he began to impart a spirit within me that this was not just a love poem from Debbie to Eddie, but it was actually a love poem from God to each of his precious redeemed children, that when your plans go up in smoke and everything's just crumbled and laying around you, that there's a rose. He has a blessing tucked inside there.
Fantastic. So this is really a message about hope.
It is, absolutely.
And one thing that we have learned on this set over and over is that people write books. They write the books that they need to read. So why did you need a message of hope in your life?
Well, in 2003, my husband, we'd been married 28 years, and he was diagnosed with cancer, and he had surgery and then some chemo and radiation for what we thought would just be cleanup. But then after the first round, it turned into transitional lymphoma and jumped to the other side of his body, and it was just more than he could handle. But right before that, God spoke to my heart about writing a book. And Eddie did know about it. He got to know about it, though he didn't get to see the finished product. But it just evolved from all of that.
So you needed a message of hope right then.
Oh, absolutely.
Where did you find hope during that trial?
The only place you can find hope, and that's through God.
And how would you do that? Was it praying every day? Was it reading the scriptures? How would you connect with God in the middle of a trial like that?
Well, Ginger, it has to be a combination of things. And what I did in the book, there's 3 sections. The first section is the hearth of my heart. And I use an architectural fireplace with the hearth and talk about the things that you have to have there. God's love fire is in the firebox, the fireplace as we think of it. But on the hearth you have the wood stacked up, and that's your faith. And then you have the tools that are nearby, the poker, which is your prayer and praise, because you can have prayer but you need praise to go along with it. And then you need that shovel for cleaning out the debris or the sin in your life. So it's there has to be a recipe for having a healthy spiritual life, and I do talk about that in there. The next section dealt with ashes. When you're, as I said earlier, when your plans go up in smoke and everything is just kind of laying there on the hearth, then God says, hey, I need you to pay attention here, that I have something positive to come out of this. And then the last section is roses, and that's God's blessing in that.
What do you think, for someone going through a really difficult time, what's the hardest part? Is there a stage that's more difficult than others?
I believe there is, and it's having the strength or the desire to either get up off of the sofa, come out of the darkened room, to approach the ashes, to feel secure that there is hope and a blessing in those plans that have gone awry.
So just knowing that there is something good to come out of this, that will give people the courage and the strength to stand up and get going.
I believe so. That's the beginning. Of course, you know, I can sit here and believe all I want to, but until I practice my faith, until I take that first step. But if you take the first step, He'll take the rest of them with you.
Well, what a powerful message of hope. And walk me through, is this a book that I would give to somebody, or is this a book that I would read for myself? Tell me how you see this book being used.
Well, the answer to both questions is yes.
Good answer.
You know, it's so funny. When I first began the book, I envisioned it to be just this little pamphlet, you know, type thing that you could buy to stick in a card or tuck in your friend's purse who's hurting and say, I have something for you that I think would touch your heart or minister to you. And then as I began to talk with my publisher, the people, Athena Dean at Wine Press, she said, Debbie, I believe you have a story to tell, and I'd like to see you tell it. And that's where it went. But it's something, if you don't need everything that's in there now, at some point in time, you're going to need it. It's not when there will be ashes. It is when. It's not if, it's when. Because if you don't need everything that's in there now, you will later.
Well, this is such good stuff. I want to ask you some more questions about your work and your life. So sit tight, and you sit tight too, and we will be right back on Deeper Living.
Come on, everybody.
Hey, for all you've done for me. I really do believe I'm the inside where you breathe. It's the sun who sets me free. He's for everything you are, my Lord, my God, my King, my God. Let God arise in you, let He arise in you and me arise. Let God arise. Hey, for all you've done for me, I really do believe I'm the inside where you breathe. Yes, it's the sun who sets me free. He's for everything you are, my Lord, my God, my King, my God. Let God arise in you, let me arise in you and me arise. Let God arise in you, let me arise in you and me arise. Let God arise. Children of Singapore, children of El Salvador, children throughout the world, rise together now. Children of Malaysia, children of Cambodia, children of Asia, rise together now.
Welcome back to Deeper Living. Our guest today is Debby Jones. You've been telling us about your book, A Rose Among the Ashes, which is really the tragic story of your husband's death and how you learned to find a thing of beauty among the ashes of a trial. But you were also sharing with us before we went to break that this is not just a book for people who are in the midst of a trial.
Right.
This is for people to live every day so that they'll be prepared when a trial comes. Share with me a little bit, what would you like to see for this next generation of women? How do they need to be living their lives?
Well, Ginger, there's a recipe in the book for having a healthy spiritual life. But one of the main things that we have to keep in mind is that sometimes we can get so caught up in day-to-day living that we neglect the things that are important to keep that line of communication open between our heart and God's heart. And we need to have a balanced life. And I shared something that was in one of our bulletins at church one Sunday that God showed me that just kind of reinforced what He had already shown me. But we have to be careful that our prayer, our praise are in equal amounts. Our Bible study, it all has to be in equal amounts, because if you don't, then you're going to wind up unbalanced. Like your prayer time, it will wind up in a name that won't, or an emotional prayer time. Bible study, then without that balanced prayer time, you're not going to hear the voice of God speaking. So we as Christian men and women, we've got to learn how to balance all of that so that when trials do come, we're just not knocked flat on our face. And we do have that strength that only God can give to approach those ashes, to look for the beauty.
Okay. Well, you know, I think we're all selfish by nature, and it's easy for me to just make my list of wants and pray. What's the importance of praise? I mean, you talk about having a balance and not forgetting praise or minimizing it, but why?
Well, I share an example in that, and if you'll let me
Sure.
share that. One night after Eddie had passed away, I was just really grieving greatly. I mean, I have still grieved tremendously
Sure.
over his death, and I felt myself becoming overwhelmed with the grief. And then God spoke to my heart, and He showed me in the book of Daniel, where Daniel laid face down on the ground. And he says, and became dumb, he became silent. The Holy Spirit spoke to my heart and said, lay down in the floor. And so I did. I became obedient at that moment. I thought, oh, He's going to show me some vision like He did Daniel that day. You know, what is He going to show me? And then as I began to lay down, I became dumb, but I just thought about all that He is to me, and I praised Him for everything He's brought me through. And the more I praised Him, the more it became about Him, 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 and not me, me, me.
Yeah.
And I heard the clock chime, and I felt released to get up off of the floor, and I realized He had done something tremendous and unusual in forcing me to put my face to the ground and let me focus on Him. And I realized that grief had just suddenly just released itself, and I felt like a totally different person.
Wow. So your life was transformed on the spot by praise.
It was. It was.
And how do you live that out every day?
Sometimes it's tough because the evil one, the destroyer, wants to come in and take away that peace and that joy, that comfort that only God can give. And you just have to purpose in your heart, just like David did. I purpose in my heart that I'm not going to let Satan steal. I'm not going to let him creep in and take away that which God has so graciously bestowed upon me.
Okay. So you're really living it out day by day.
It is. It's a minute by minute thing.
Yeah. How has your life been changed after writing this book?
Well, God told me He was going to open doors. And it has just been unbelievable. He's provided an opportunity. I did participate in the International Christian Retail Show a few weeks ago, and I was just amazed. They ran out of my books when I signed, and it was just overwhelming to me. And He's provided opportunities to speak at churches, and now this wonderful opportunity to be with y'all on Deeper Living, and I'm just amazed.
Do you think, are you constantly surprised by how many hurting people are in the church?
Yes, and we hide it so well. We do. But it's God He'll open that door and He'll show you. There'll be just a little word or something that maybe one of us as a fellow Christian might tune in on. You think, that person's really hurting, and what can I do to help them?
Well, I think your book is such a fantastic way to reach out to people. Have you got any stories about the people who have received this book as a gift and how it's ministered to them?
I did hear from a lady in one of our local banks where I bank at home, and she had bought it for her mother-in-law whose husband had just passed away. And so she gave it to her, and a couple of weeks later when I went through the drive-through, she said, Debbie, I want to tell you, she said, I gave your book to my mother-in-law, and she said it really ministered to her and touched her heart because of what she had been going through. And if there's just one story like that, Ginger, then it's all worth it.
Well, thank you for being faithful to write this. And one thing I want to talk about when we come back is, I think we touched a little bit on it, but just the fear when you're going through a trial, and how fear can keep you in that dark room or can keep you on the couch. And I want to talk about how you managed to overcome that. So sit tight, and we will be right back on Deeper Living. Welcome back. We're talking today with Debby Fields Jones, and you have been sharing with us a really heartrending story of beauty from the ashes, you know, the roses that you found in the midst of trials. And I want to ask you about the fear that we feel, and we just feel like, you know, we're free falling when we're in a situation like that. Tell me about how fear was a part of your story and how you overcame it.
Well, Ginger, it's ironic that you're asking about that very question. Something that my son Jeremy shared with me. We would talk off and on during Eddie's illness, and he told me about that God kept bringing the story of Abraham and Isaac to his mind, with God asking Abraham to sacrifice the promise that God had given him with his son Isaac. And of course, you know, we know the story that, you know, God stayed his hand once he had Isaac on the altar, and he said, "I see now that you've not withheld anything from me." And Jeremy told me, he said, "Mama, I believe that God is taking us right to the edge with Daddy's cancer." And then God really began to deal with my heart about that. But I realized, Ginger, that yes, God had me at the edge, but I never felt any fear. Because I was always convinced in my heart that Eddie would be healed here, though God had different plans. But my faith stayed on that, and God, I think that's how God walked me through that valley, by keeping my mind focused and stayed on Him and the positive things. And that doesn't mean that God will misled me or lied to me or anything like that. God does what He has to do individually with His own children to get them through each trial. But what is so ironic is that I am deathly afraid to be at the edge of anything. And I share a story in there about trying to climb the fire tower at Duggar Mountain, right up from Piedmont. After the first part, I would hyperventilate, and Eddie would have to help me back down because I can't stand to be at the edge of anything. That's a phobia I have. But when we walked at the edge, He always had me under His wing of protection so that I couldn't see the edge. And I think that's how God helps with the fear. When He has us tucked securely under His wing, we can't see the edge. We can't see what's threatening us.
Well, that's fantastic. So for someone struggling with fear like that, what would you say is the first step to overcoming it?
Realizing that God is in control. And you have to accept that. God is in control of the situation that is out of your control, but you can control how you respond to God. And it's all about a choice. I've always made the choice to turn to God.
And what would you say to someone, you know, if they're praying for healing and they're believing in healing, but the healing doesn't come on earth? What would you say to someone who's just brokenhearted and does feel that maybe they've been betrayed by God or let down?
You know, God expects us to ask why. He knows we're human. We're going to ask why. And we're going to tell Him we don't understand. And it was a process. God just had to help me to understand that this was His plan. Eddie's season on this earth was finished. But God had another season for me to walk on, to turn the next page in the chapter in the book of my life. But it's something that each person, God is going to have to work one-on-one. You know, God does not do generic things. It's a one-on-one relationship with Him, and He's going to do absolutely what He has to do to take His child from one step to the next.
I think you've survived something that is a fear that every wife has, that her husband will go to be with the Lord too early. And now at this point in your life, after you've survived what really is so many of our worst fears, are you more afraid of the trials ahead, or are you less afraid?
I think I have to take each one as they come, Ginger. Because each thing is different. As all of this with the book began to snowball a little bit, I started having panic attacks. I've never had panic attacks before in my life. And I have a wonderful friend who has helped walk me through those panic attacks, and he's been there for me. And he'll always be there. God brought arose out of these ashes. He brought a new friend into my life. And we're just growing together in the Lord. And then some are not as scary as others.
Yeah. Well, releasing a book out into the world is always scary. I do
Yes.
know what you mean about the panic attacks. You know, one other question that I was really curious about is, now that this book is out there, now that you've released it, what's next for you? What do you think you want to do with your message and your ministry?
God has spoken to my heart very clearly about a ministry.
Yeah.
Not all, some of the images are a little shadowy. He hasn't revealed everything yet, but I do know that there is a ministry out there. I've begun to speak and to sing
great.
to women's groups and church groups and things like that. And we have some other book signings coming up. And
Yeah.
I know He's opening doors that I never imagined that would be open to me, but I'm ready to walk through them.
Yeah, and what do you feel when you see these doors just flying open for you? Are you grateful? Are you humble? Are you a little scared?
Yes, that's one of those questions. Yes, to all the
Yes,
answers. I am humbled that He has chosen to use me.
Yeah.
I feel so unworthy
Yeah.
to be used in such a way. And I always say, may I never cease to be amazed at what God does, because if I cease to be amazed, then I tend to take Him for granted.
Yeah.
And then I'm excited too.
Yeah.
It's a little bittersweet
Yeah.
that Eddie is not here physically with
Sure.
me to enjoy all of this,
Yeah.
but he's here spiritually with me.
Yeah, well, this is such good stuff. Sit tight. We've got a few more minutes with Debbie, and we will be right back.
Every good and perfect gift comes down from heaven above. Every good and perfect gift from above. Every good and perfect gift comes down from heaven above. Every good and perfect gift from above. From the Father of lights, removing, He's no changing. From the Father of lights, who's always the same. Praise the Lord, oh, praise the Lord, oh, every good and perfect gift.
Let's all sing it together.
Comes down from heaven above. Every good and perfect gift from above.
Every good and perfect gift.
Every good and perfect gift comes down from heaven above. Every good and perfect gift from above.
From the Father of lights.
From the Father of lights, recruited, He's no changing. From the Father of lights, who is always the same. Praise the Lord, oh, praise the Lord, oh, yeah.
Up we go.
Praise the Lord, oh, praise the Lord, oh, yeah. Every good and perfect gift comes down from heaven above. Every good and perfect gift from above.
Every good and perfect gift.
Every good and perfect gift.
Welcome back to Deeper Living. We've got just a few minutes left with author Debbie Fields Jones, and thank you so much for spending time with us today.
Oh, you're welcome. It's been my pleasure.
And I want to tell our viewers before I forget that if you want more information on this book, visit our website at DeeperLiving.com. And we were talking about this is a great book to give someone who is struggling.
Yes.
And would I give it to someone who's a Christian, or would I feel comfortable giving it to a neighbor and if I'm not sure where they are spiritually?
Well, we're batting 1,000 with that question today. Yes. I could not finish the book without including the plan of salvation in it, in case there's someone who's never come to the saving knowledge of Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
Whether you know Jesus Christ as your Savior
Yeah.
or not, we all have one thing in common. We hurt. Bad things happen to us.
Yeah.
So I wanted to give the reader the very end, the best rose of all, which is
Yeah.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah, so this is a book that, you know, if someone is really hurting, they're open to the message of Christ, aren't they?
They are. I try to portray that throughout the entire book, that there is only one way that you can face life's trials, and that is through Jesus Christ.
And you know, I think a lot of people, when they see someone who's written a book, they think, well, that's a very special person. That's not who I am. And maybe she got through that trial, but I can't. What would you say to that person who thinks that, well, you're an author, it was easy for you, what would you say to them?
I never dreamed that I would do this.
Yeah.
Never dreamed. I've been a Sunday school teacher, I sing, but I'm just a normal person.
Yeah.
But my heart's desire was to be used by God
Yeah.
to touch others. And that's what He chose to do. And when He calls you to do something, He'll equip you. He's not going to call you and then say, okay, here you are.
Yeah.
You know, just it's sink or swim.
Yeah.
He'll give you the words. In fact, in one part in it, I thank God for all that He's done through this because
Yeah.
I'm just His typist.
Yeah.
I just typed what He dictated,
Yeah.
but you know, I can do all things through Christ, which strengthens me.
Yes. What would you say, now, who are you today versus who you were before this trial started? How are you a different woman?
I've learned that I have a life outside of being married to Eddie Jones.
Yeah.
And I've learned that God will do unusual things with His children to bring them through trials.
Yeah.
And it's okay when you hurt. It's going to be okay.
Yeah.
There's the bright spot. There's a blessing. There's something positive that's going to come out of this, because God talks about in His Word that not to be concerned about the fiery trial of your faith, that He has great plans for that trial of faith. And I've learned that my faith has become so much stronger
Yeah.
in Him throughout this, and I just try to turn to Him every time I begin to struggle.
Oh, that's so good. And you know, I think one thing that helps people is having a constant reminder and constant positive reinforcing messages through programs like this, through books like
Absolutely.
yours. Tell me real briefly, just what were some of the things that really propped you up and kept you going? Friends?
I have a wonderful church family.
Yeah.
And I have not only the church family, but there's families within the church
Yeah.
who are like my own children,
Uh-huh.
An extended family, and they've always been there for me. My son Jeremy lives about an hour and a half away from me, so they've been there for me when I need things at home, or you know, it's just wonderful. My coworkers, I'm surrounded. God has surrounded me with wonderful people.
Wow, what a blessing. And thank you so much for sharing your story with us here today. If you want more information about the book, we would love for you to visit our website, and be sure and stay with us every time we're on here at Deeper Living. Bye-bye.